Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 20th of August, and joining me on this edition are Steve Withers.
You just popped in for a quick bite.
Ed Selley.
Stole the plans for this car 2 years ago.
And Mark Botwright.
Very important to have a positive mental attitude.
We're having the bank holiday off. I just thought I'd get that out of the way straight away. So there is no podcast next week, people. You're going to have to do without us. I know that is an issue, and we will post some phone numbers for help and advice at the end of the podcast.
Why not delve into our back catalogue?
Yeah,
I mean, you know, just relive our golden moments.
Yeah, why not go?
Confusion, incomprehension, general insanity.
Or you could listen to the professional version from 2006.
No. What? Yeah. We're on the few organisations. It's possible to watch our decline.
It is. If you go back in 2006 and then dip in about 2008, then dip in at, I don't know, 2012.
2 year intervals. I mean, I think from the moment I turned up, things went south pretty quickly. So, you know,
So
like a catalyst.
I can't believe it used to be just me and Phil for a couple of years, which must have been really boring.
You only did 1 month, though, didn't you?
Yeah, that was true. We only did one a month.
Yeah.
We'll have to do a book, and that'll be the whatever years, you know, when you get the band and the band are successful at the start, and then you'd have that dip, and then they have their little revival at the end. Although we haven't hit that little revival at the end yet. We're still in the dip.
We're doing our big in Japan tour.
Steve's itching that we move on to Smell the Glove, presumably. But
so what have you been up to this week, Mark? Have you got this paint job finished yet?
No, the weather hasn't been nice enough. No, it's you know what? I've very boringly spent probably the past week having a bit of a clear up, because it's got that feel now of autumn's coming. You know, the summer's not coming back now. So, you know, have a proper clear up, get rid of everything that you didn't wear during the summer. That's my view.
I don't know. There's generally a pickup in the weather when they send the kids back to school.
Well, Indian summer.
Yeah, it's just generally what happens, because it's not right unless you're locked back into a classroom where it's swelteringly hot. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes from there. But yeah, I do agree with you. It felt distinctly autumnal a couple of days ago here, which is exciting, because obviously all of the heating in the granny annex is on sort of electric storage heaters, and I'm sure it'll cost me about £1 a minute to heat it. But you know,
And they won't work.
I don't know. I'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Am I the only one that yeah, I like summer. I enjoy the light nights and getting out and all the rest of it. But I also enjoy autumn nights where the dark nights are coming in, and it gives you an excuse to sit and watch films.
If your hobby is watching films in a dark room, it's a lot easier to justify it in the winter than it is in the summer. I'll tell you what I've noticed though. If you got a sleep watch, haven't you, Phil?
Yeah.
My hours, if I looked at the monthly average of actual decent hours of sleep that I get, and there's a noticeable drop in the summer months because of the fact it's light early, gets dark late,
yeah,
and it's hot, stuffy.
Is it not a case though you're getting old as well, Steve? So you've got to make the most of every day.
No, I'm just saying that in the winter, because you know it's darker.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Sleep better. I just sleep better.
Yeah, well,
it's quite a noticeable drop. An hour difference in terms of quality sleep because of atmospheric conditions, I suppose.
But I think it's also you know, from our past as a species that we did sleep more in the winter. We were more hibernating, and we'd store up fat and stuff like that. Well, that's my excuse anyway.
Well, I think generally it was bad to go out in the dark because something would eat you. So best to wait till the sun comes up.
Yeah, well, there is an element of that, isn't there?
This sounds like a scientific discussion from 4 blokes who know nothing about what they're talking about.
Human evolution, I know, sod all, really.
Is that not the podcast every week, Mark?
Yeah, to be fair.
Very occasionally, just by accident, we sort of drift into an area we actually know something about.
I don't see why ignorance should hold us back. It doesn't seem to be a problem for anyone else. You know.
Yeah, isn't that kind of almost champion these days, isn't it? No one wants to know about what experts think. We want to know what the man in the street thinks. I don't care what the man in the street thinks. I want to know what the expert thinks.
Someone has taken this approach and is now leading the most powerful country on earth.
Yeah.
So,
the man in the street's an idiot has been proved admirably over the last few years.
It's actually, I always think it's more nuanced than that. If you meet an individual, even if you have pretty much diametrically opposed views, if it's a one-on-one conversation, there's an element of civility to it.
Yeah.
When you actually then have large groups of people with diametrically opposing views, it begins to disintegrate pretty quickly. Then when you remove the face-to-face element and stick them both on the internet, that's it. I mean, if you like, that's that you can chart the decline of civilization to that point when it was when you no longer ran the risk of being instantly punched in the face for saying something truly objectionable. It's become just a sprint to the bottom. And on that happy note,
so Mark, you were saying?
No, I just like the tagline: "The man in the street is an idiot." Just stick with that.
Yeah, I don't see that being very popular when it comes to PR in a right. Ed, what you been up to?
I've been listening to stuff. I got a new washing machine. It was great. There was one of the few upsides to renting a place I'd forgotten about. The washing machine let go spectacularly a couple of days ago. Oh, water all over the floor.
We got the landlord.
I was like, oh God, I need to get that sorted. And I don't need to get this sorted at all. There's someone that will sort it for us. And yeah, absolutely. I've got a shiny new BlacKkKlansman washing machine. It's lovely.
Oh, BlacKkKlansman.
Are we on to your white goods reviews now?
Do you know if someone wants me to review it, I will. I have to say, we had a BlacKkKlansman washing machine in the old house. I personally think BlacKkKlansman's on a massive charm offensive. They're putting the legwork in across all of their stuff. Footballing metaphors here, perhaps. And you get great bang for your buck out of the BlacKkKlansman product.
Has it got a good short wash?
Yes, 30 degrees, 23 minutes. I don't think 30 degrees is warm enough for me. I'd say a 40. No, I don't think it gets close to clean. Sorry, just don't. 40 degrees is 38 minutes, and it's got a 1400 RPM spin, so it comes out at the end of it pretty much ready to hang up.
See, I want something, a short sports wash, something in 15 minutes, something like that.
Now you see the machine that we had at my old house that had a sub 20-minute wash, but the problem is it scrimped on the spin, so it washed it in that length of time, but it came out sopping wet.
I went to South Korea a number of years ago, and I was shown a washing machine that I was promised was coming to market that washed your clothes without water.
Yeah, did they discover that concept didn't work? Do you reckon?
So using antifreeze.
We do need water.
I've never seen it on the market yet, so let's just say it's probably still in development.
I've always had a theory that dry cleaners don't actually do anything to clean your clothes. They just press them and spray them with a smell and then give them back to you. Because I've never said anything come back from the dry cleaners with stains that have actually been removed by them. It's like you lot are useless.
I think that's more a reflection of the stains they create are just more pernicious. For most people. So.
Yeah, red wine and vomit doesn't come out easily.
Jesus, that's a dark Daz doorstep challenge.
Yeah, throw in some blood and we're really going.
Actually, shameless plug there. If you've got the Kindle Unlimited deal, the Sniff Petrol Roy Lanchester How to Be a Motoring Journalist book is included in that deal, and that's just genius.
I love Lanchester. He's brilliant.
So funny.
He's the type of creation. He's even further removed than Alan Partridge, but he's so far removed. If you're actually, I think we get it more because we've been on these press trips.
Well, you say so far removed, but isn't it? The reason it's funny is because we know people.
I know. Well, this is what I'm saying. It's so far removed in terms of. I think the public might not get it, but if you've ever been to a press event of any kind whatsoever, or ever dealt with PR people or anything like that, it is just pure genius.
Well, old school journalists are fantastic.
My favourite quote from the whole book, I've got it here. In my experience, deadlines are all made up anyway, apart from the ones on daily newspapers, which are very real, as is the warning note on your personnel file if you keep ignoring them. In other words, deadlines are like the best before dates on food. They can be ignored, but to do so may cause you to shit yourself. When I buy my next house, I'm having that in poster size on my wall. None of this inspirational, love, live, laugh bollocks. I'm having one that as that will be my rider quote on the wall because it's true.
Well, this week, boringly, I've done lots of work this week, so I've not got much to talk about really. So yeah, kind of boring at this end. And I still can't get in my cinema room, which is a problem because I've got a 4K projector review at the minute, and I've still got the floor's just still full of TVs and boxes.
I thought you said you've been lots of work. What have you been doing then? If you haven't been reviewing the projector you're meant to be reviewing?
Well, that's because that room is full of TVs that I am reviewing at the minute.
What you mean is you can't get to the projector to review it.
That's what I mean, yeah, because I've got boxes lying everywhere, TVs lying everywhere, TVs in boxes, TVs out of boxes. The living room's great because that's the room I'm working in, so I've just bring one TV in at a time or two at a time if I'm doing side by sides. But yes, it's causing a bit of an issue.
Worst
now.
comes to worst, yeah, you could do a little review of whether TV boxes make a decent cinema screen.
or furniture.
Yeah.
How comfortable are they to sit on?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Curry's showroom's got sorry, not the showroom. The storeroom has got nothing on my place at the minute.
Well, they've got more space, I suspect.
Well, yeah, they probably have got that on me.
Probably a big help.
No, I was just going to ask whether you were even slightly tempted to build a fort out of the boxes.
Yeah.
No, not yet. I did build a maze to the because in that room I've got a concrete block where I have my scales, so the scales are accurate. So I actually built a maze out of the boxes to get to the scales.
Do you play the Krypton Factor music when you go through it?
In my head.
Well, yeah, I'm not expecting you to have rigged up a Sonos.
Alexa, play the Krypton Factor music.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
Oh shit, she's heard me. Hang on. Alexa, stop. Gosh, she can hear it really well. I'm in another room. I'm in the home cinema. She's in the lounge.
She's listened to
everything I've said.
Yeah.
And I said some bad things.
What have you been up to, Steve?
Not much, actually. No, I've just been trying to get stuff finished because I'm away next week and I'm going to Bovington next Monday.
Oh, yes, you said it's Tanktastic.
Tanktastic Day, yes. But otherwise, yeah, I haven't done much, really. I went to the cinema. Obviously, we'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, that was it, really. It was a pretty boring week.
So you're going to the Tank Museum anywhere else nice that you're going when you're away on holiday?
Not at the moment, no.
Yeah, Steve, so it sounds like one of these holidays where you've planned out the first day, but the rest of the week's going to be spent in whatever place you're at because the two of you kind of decide what you're going to do all day, and it'll turn into an argument, and I'll be right, okay, well, we'll just stay here then. That's
the plan, and then I'll just go in the home cinema and watch some films. Have a busman's holiday, as usual.
Got it all planned out.
More planned than he gave credit for.
Yeah, no, I know how he thinks because I'd be the same. I'd say, yeah, have a week off. I'm going to spend it watching most of the films. But if I had a partner, I'd probably just do the one sort of day out. But it'd be a day out where it's something I want to do.
Yeah, Bovington. She doesn't want to go to the Tank Museum. I'm not going with my wife. I'm going with some friends.
Oh well, you'll just have to buy lots of prosecco.
Oh, that's all right. Or Carver. I'd like a nice drop of Carver.
Okay, so that's us all cut up. Steve, any competitions this week?
There's one running at the moment. You can win a copy of Sex, Lies and Videotape, which was Steven Soderbergh's first film, on Blu-ray. That's a Criterion Edition collection, so it should look and sound fantastic, and obviously lots of great extras. And that competition runs until Sunday, the 26th of August.
Okay, excellent. And it's nice to see Criterion still in the marketplace. Fantastic label, who came to prominence in the Laserdisc age, basically. That's where they started, so it's nice to see them still going with a collector's edition. So, worthy prize there. Any previous winners, Steve?
Yes, actually, I think we've got a couple here. Adam David, he won Flesh and Blood on Blu-ray, which is Paul Verhoeven's first English language film, and I watched it last week, actually. Looks pretty good, and is an interesting film, certainly not one for the squeamish. Also, Bryn Tegg won A Quiet Place on 4K Blu-ray, so great prize there. Really, really good disc, got fantastic soundtrack. And I think we also got Empty Cup. He or she won The Death of Superman on Blu-ray.
Okay, that's us all caught up and competition is done. So we'll be back in a sec with hardware news. Right, hardware time. Let's go to Steve first, because Steve's been looking at an interesting product from Sonos. Now, Sonos have really carved out a market for themselves over the last sort of 10 years, but they haven't really done much in terms of soundbar, Steve. They've had...
They've got one, right?
Yeah.
The play bar, which isn't cheap. I think it's $699, and doesn't include any HDMI inputs or outputs. So it's a fairly, it's a limited soundbar in that sense. Clearly, it evolved out of their existing business, which obviously is multi-room. I mean, that's what they're synonymous with. Sonos is multi-room, and this was a soundbar designed to integrate with their multi-room system. But I don't think necessarily would be considered ideal for the AV enthusiast. Particularly, you at least need one HDMI output with ARC. I think that's a key. I think most soundbars should have at least that, and if they don't, then you're reduced to having to use optical digital, and you lose things like CEC. So this new soundbar that they've announced and launched is the Sonos Beam, which has obviously they've obviously taken feedback on board from the Playbar, and the Beam kind of incorporates some of these factors. So first of all, it's a much smaller form factor than the Playbar, which was relatively large. This is quite a compact soundbar. Obviously, that means it fits in nicely into smaller lounges. It works better with smaller screen sizes as well. But even though it's relatively small, it does produce a pretty big soundstage for something as small as that, because as the name might suggest, they've got a multitude of speakers built into the soundbar, beaming in to the sides and out to the front, so they give it a nice wide big front soundstage. Crucially, it also has an HDMI output, so you can connect it to the TV, and then you have access to ARC and things like CEC as well. You can control it from another. You can control the TV at the same time as the soundbar. And I've got to say, it does. One thing that's interesting, they used to have an optical digital input. That's been dropped now. What you get is a little adapter that comes with it, so you can plug your optical cable into the adapter, then into the HDMI input. So interestingly, they've gone like completely the other direction now and dropped the optical digital input and gone just for HDMI. Otherwise, it's there's a LAN port, built-in Wi-Fi, of course, and USB port, and it's one thing I'll say, when you set it up, you can immediately appreciate Sonos's experience and years of experience in the area of multi-room and app control, because it doesn't come with a remote control. It's all controlled from the Sonos app, and it is amazing. It's really slick. Setup is incredibly easy. It's really intuitive to use. It's got most of the things you would want integrated into it already, things like Spotify, plus it also integrates various skills, so Alexa skills, so I shouldn't say that too loudly, she might hear me. Alexa skills, so you can control it from your from Alexa. You can also control it from Google Assistant, although I don't have Google Assistant to test, but I did have Alexa, which worked fine. So you immediately get the feeling that this is a product that's at least paying lip service to the more AV end of the market, but also still includes all of the benefits that you'd expect from a Sonos product, which is ease of setup, really easy, intuitive use, beautifully integrated system. Obviously, if you've got more Sonos products, it all fits into a nice multi-room system. I don't have any more. I just had the one product in for review, but you get that feeling that this is a very slick product. But importantly, it also sounds really good. It sounds way bigger than it looks, which I think is a key to these smaller compact soundbars. You don't want them to sound like small boxes. You want them to sound big and open, because even if the TV isn't that large, you're still talking about the front of the room. So you want something that can spread across that front soundstage, and it's got some bass to it too. Obviously, it doesn't have a separate subwoofer, so it doesn't have the kind of deep bass you get from any soundbar that has its own sub. But it still sounds pretty bassy for something of that size. And I've got to say, overall, I was genuinely impressed with it. It's the first Sonos product I've actually reviewed personally. And I think I've done any others. I think Ed did you did the other stuff.
I've done one or two.
Yeah. So I was interested to see how I'd feel about Sonos, and I've got to say I really was really impressed. It was well made, intelligently designed, easy to set up, intuitive to use, and it sounds great. So overall, I was impressed. And I think it's 399 quid, so it's a lot cheaper than the previous incarnation.
So it's smaller. So do you think they've actually discovered that the average screen size in the UK isn't 50 inches and above?
I think they may have realised that, yes, because the playbar is pretty wide and clearly was designed for much larger screen sizes. And although large screen sizes are increasing in terms of sales, I think the average screen size in the UK is still around 42 inches, isn't it? That's the average screen size. Yeah. So this soundbar clearly been designed for something of that size rather than 50, 55, 65 inch screen sizes, which are still relative, not are increasing in commonality, but are still reasonably rare in the average household. So yeah, but I think for what it's designed to do, I think it works. But it's got a great feature. When you're setting it up, you use the app on the phone and you basically walk around the room. It takes measurements and does all that stuff for you. So the setup is really easy and intuitive and works really well. And the results are great. So yeah, very impressed with the Sonos.
Problem with Sonos for me anyway has been it's never felt incredibly good value for money, Steve. So what do you think of this one?
$399. That's at the higher end of the. I mean, obviously, I'd say 200 quid is kind of the sub 200, you're talking about very cheap soundbars that tend to be, have no HDMI, for example, won't have a subwoofer, that kind of thing. When you get to 400 quid, generally you tend to find there's more soundbars with a separate sub, and that is something I think for the home theatre enthusiast, a separate sub really does add to the experience, doesn't it? Because once you've got that deep bass, it makes movies in particular, particularly modern film soundtracks where bass is an integral part of the sound design. It makes them more enjoyable, and there is a certain once you go to a single unit soundbar with no separate sub, you do have to sacrifice some low frequency energy because let's be honest, you just can't deliver it from a soundbar. Some soundbars can sound quite bassy. I've heard a few in my time that have surprised in that area, but overall, I think if you want that deep bass, then you're going to need to get a separate sub. Obviously, if you buy the Beam, you can add a subwoofer. There is a wireless sub available to buy. Also, you can add rear speakers. You can turn it into a 5.1 system. It does, of course, increase the cost quite considerably. And then you start looking at, when you get into higher price points, there are a lot of options available. And they've got things like Atmos as well, or DTSX support, which you're not going to find on this. So is it? Yes, I still think, even though it's cheaper than the Playbar, considerably cheaper, it's still a little bit pricey. And you are in a very competitive part of the marketplace there, where you're going to find products that might have a separate subwoofer, and that would maybe swing it for me. If, as a movie fan, I think I like to have a separate sub.
It almost seems like a kind of entry point for kind of Sonos products, with the multi-room aspect. It seems very much built on the idea of you can add speakers later on, you can add extra things, and so get into the experience of using their products and that kind of thing. And if you like them, then
it's a gateway product in a way. Really, it's a gateway product. The idea, I think, is you buy the soundbar, or either you buy the soundbar and then build on top of that as you realize how intuitive and good and easy to use and effective the whole system is, or alternatively, you've got a couple of Play 1s or Play 5s or whatever knocking around the house, and then you think, oh, I'll add to this and I'll get the soundbar because I can also integrate it into the system. So I think it's primarily aimed at Sonos fans initially anyway, but it does perhaps act as a gateway product to those who maybe aren't familiar with Sonos products and then think, oh, you know what, this works well. And I think it is a little bit, it sounds great with music too. So I think the musical aspect of it and the multi-room aspect of it is quite important to Sonos. But I think the fact they've at least added an HDMI input, or output rather, is it at least shows that they're listening to feedback and realizing that they want a competitive soundbar. Then they need to think about things like that. And you're right, Mark, there is the option if you want to then build on that later and create maybe a 5.1 system if you wanted to. So I guess it fits into their whole philosophy, which is buying things in segmented sort of, buying up one product and then adding to it and then gradually adding to it and slowly building up a system throughout the entire house. So yeah, you're right. That I think that's probably part of their philosophy.
Okay, there we go. So that's a Sonos Beam. The review will be up probably towards the end of the week that you're listening to this podcast. For me, like I said, I've been looking at a lot of TVs recently. I'm currently looking at Samsung, and the review for that will be up probably the week following this podcast, or at the end of the week that you listen to the podcast. In the meantime, I have reviewed a Cello 50-inch LCD TV. Now, this is a budget TV. The review is up there, so I'm not going to go into it in any great detail because you can go and read the review. The problem with this end of the market is that it's getting incredibly tight when it comes to what you actually get for your money. And we're seeing the Chinese companies coming into this marketplace as well. So the likes of Hisense and TCL have now launched a couple of TVs at this price point. Now, Cello are a British manufacturer, and which should be applauded. There's not many British companies these days, certainly in the AV world, so it's good to see a company. And they actually came to us and said, would you like to have a look at the product, because they want to see what the AVForums think and the AVForums audience think. Now, it's not normally a product that I think the AVForums audience would go to for their first or their main TV in the living room. It's more at this kind of price point, something that people would maybe pick up for the bedroom or the kitchen or whatever as a secondary, or maybe even a third TV, or one for the kids' bedrooms or whatever. But we said, yeah, we'll have a look at it, and we did. And it's one of these products that is obviously built for a certain sector of the market, and picture quality is not higher up on the list of priorities, it would seem, because the problem is, and I think it's perhaps a misunderstanding of how gamma works, Steve, because if you look at the graphs and you proofed the review, they've gone for a linear gamma. Now, that's great if you are trying to map... I'm going to keep it nice and simple. I won't go into, the actual codes.
We are going down a very complicated hole here.
But I'm going to keep it nice and simple. But basically, if you want linear gamma if you're watching 4K HDR, because it basically tone maps. The EOTF is basically a linear gamma, and what we mean by that is it's normally a straight line from 0 to 100. The problem that you have is that all TV content, all films, everything up until very recently has always been mastered with a gamma curve, and that comes from the days of CRT. And it's, without getting overly technical...
Even further back that, it comes from the days of vacuum tube.
It does,
monitors
actually,
and TVs and cameras,
So, it's always been there, this gamma curve. And it's been a case of, since we moved into the digital realm, you could do linear gamma, but everything is still mastered with a gamma curve. So it's either a misunderstanding on Cello's part with the engineers, because I've seen this on some budget TVs, like the electric before it got its update, the OLED. It had a linear gamma as well. Now the problem with that is that if the content has been mastered with a gamma curve and you then go with a linear gamma, what happens is as soon as the picture gets bright, it just clips all detail. So if you're wearing a white shirt and it's a bright-ish scene, there's no detail in the white shirt. It just becomes a white shape around the person. It looks like everybody has Botox or been using Botox, because you've got no facial lines or shadows under the eyes or under the nose, nostril area, that kind of thing. So suddenly looks like everybody's got plasticine faces because you're taking that detail away. And this was the major issue with the TV. And I go into it in great detail in the review, and also there's lots of feedback there, because if it, we understand the market position of these TVs and everything else, but we're also of the mindset that we want to push manufacturers to make the best possible products they can, even if it is at a £400 or £500 price point. And it can be done with economies of scale, because that's where Hisense come in. If you look at a Hisense TV that's £80 more expensive, it's in a different league, because the build quality is made of metal, it's got a nicer design, it's got a nicer smart TV interface, and they understand picture quality, and it's got a picture that gets really quite accurate. And Steve, you were looking at I think you're going to do a review for us of it as well, a Hisense that was under £500.
Yes, it was. I don't want to go into too much detail at the moment, but it was a new Hisense that's coming out. It was 50-inch, $499 price point. Out of the box accuracy, all the errors were less than 2, which is amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So getting back to the Cello review, it might be a 4 out of 10, but actually, if they were to take some of the things that we found there, spruce it up a little bit, add a gamma curve in, add some picture settings in there that are more in line with what we would be looking at, and all we say is that one preset within a TV must try and be accurate, because content is mastered to standards. I know we keep banging on about this, director's intent and all the rest of it. It's not just director's intent. These are the standards that the whole industry work to. It says what red should look like, it says what green should look like, it says what colour white is. And as long as one preset within a TV does that, then we're happy bunnies. If it can get accuracy, and I think if Cello were to add in a gamma curve, immediately
Can they do that via update?
Their engineers should be able to do that, not a problem. It's how the TVs are set up. It just means it's probably in the service menu, although I couldn't get access to the service menu. It's probably in there, because even though these things are perhaps put together in the UK, I have no doubt that they come from one source in Europe, which is one of the big companies that basically you order parts off the shelf from them, and that's a big company called Vestel. I think a lot of people will have heard of Vestel. My suspicion is that it's just parts ordered from Vestel and then put together, and actually about 15 miles, 20 miles down the road from me in Bishop Auckland. So it's a British company. We'd like to see them do well. We'd like to see them improve the product, and I think it's completely capable of them to do that and to add a gamma curve in. And if they were to do that, it would go from a 4 out of 10 to probably a 6 if they managed to get the gamma tracking right, because funnily enough, colour-wise, it was almost there. It was just a case of, because the gamma was skew with and the white balance was off, if they were correct those 2 points, I think everything would fall into place pretty nicely, to be honest, and it wouldn't have that bad an image, to be honest, because video processing was a bit average for that price point. There was no nasties in there or anything else, and it managed 4K material. It wasn't HDR, and it doesn't pretend to be HDR, but it would handle 4K.
At least they were honest in that respect then.
Yes, absolutely. And watching 4K discs and so on, yeah, there was the gamma problem there, but I think if they solved that for the money, I think it would be perfectly reasonable TV. Certainly for AVForums members as a second, third, or even fourth TV. It would be perfectly reasonable to shove it in the kitchen or whatever, because you get fairly decent image quality. So if you read the review, hopefully you don't read the review as me giving this TV a bit of a kicking, because that's not the intention at all. Like we say, we always try to push product and push manufacturers to make the best product they possibly can, and at AVForums we're pretty strict when it comes to picture quality, but at the same time we understand the market point, we understand what this company's trying to do, and hopefully with the feedback they've had from us, if they implement some of that and then maybe send the TV back, we'll have a second look at it. We're always up for doing things like that to get the better product. So there you go. If you want to read the full review, it's on the website. Right, we're entering the twilight zone now. So Ed has been reviewing a product that Ed shouldn't be reviewing. Tell us more.
Shouldn't be allowed anywhere near.
Well, all right. I was contacted by an organisation, and they asked, would you like to review a mobile phone? And because I'm not a complete idiot, I turned around and said, well, I've never reviewed one of those before. What is the specific interest to me having a look at it? And they go, well, it's an MQA compatible mobile phone. Really? Okay. So yes, I have read the Dummy's Guide to Reviewing Mobile Telephones and sat down and reviewed a mobile phone called the Essential PH1. And the review will be going up. You can judge how I've got on with such a thing. But it's a pretty interesting piece of kit. And I'm choosing my words carefully. I have to be, I'm aware that 2 of the 4 members of this podcast would need to be surgically separated from iPhones. I don't know what you use, Mr. Botwright.
I'm Android purely for expandable memory and that kind of thing.
Okay, well, in that case, I'm going to have a bit of a tough sell here, because it's an Android phone, so that's Phil and Steve out, and it doesn't have expandable memory, so that's Mark out. However, it does have 128 gigs on board, so there's a reasonable amount of memory to get cracking on with. But most interestingly, this is from Essential is the brainchild of a guy called Dave Rubin, who was heavily involved in the Android project to start with. And this is effectively very, very close to things like Google Pixel, in so much as it's Android with nobody else's tat smeared across the top of it. Now, this means if you put an iPhone down, you pick this up, actually you'd find it's pretty much a completely self-explanatory experience. And because of that, because it's a completely clear Android, it went straight to the Android 9 beta when that was announced about a week and a half ago. So it's absolutely on the cutting edge of that. Because it's also on the absolute cutting edge of things, it has no headphone socket. And I was all set to find that a bit of a pain in the proverbial. But 2 things. The first is it comes with a decent adapter for attaching a conventional pair of headphones. So I was playing about with that, and that was pretty impressive. Where things got really interesting is when you start using it with an external DAC out the bottom of it, and using that MQA compatibility to unpack on the phone and send a signal to other products. This is, by a comfortable margin under those conditions, if you are a Tidal user, there is no mobile there's no rival in terms of using Tidal on the move which gets anywhere near this thing. It truly is an extraordinary sounding device if you are interested in bolting ancillaries onto it. It's also worth pointing out that I've been using it with the AKG N5005 earphones, which can be used as aptX Bluetooth. And I've got to be honest, this is not the purist in me talking, but having done that, I don't think I'm going back to wired earphones on the move ever again. if I'm completely honest, because it's so much more convenient to not be tethered to your own pocket. That I'm probably going to stick with that. And then on a phone sense, because I'm sure that at least one person listening to this, say 128 gigs of internal memory in Android 9, 4 gigs of RAM, so it goes like the clappers. I've not had a single point where it's even remotely suggested that it's under any form of strain. And the industrial design is, I have to be honest, absolutely lovely. It uses a titanium frame to which glass sections are attached. It is the world's worst fingerprint magnet. Taking photos of it for the review was essentially what the sort of preparations that you normally associate with launching a satellite. But I did it. But crucially, it's been sat in my pocket with my keys, and none of the materials show the slightest sign of being in any way marked or affected by it. So whilst it does get smudgy, it does look to be pretty hard to damage, which is impressive.
What's it like in terms of like size and battery life? Because the last phone I picked up actually was after you'd recommended that AudioQuest Dragonfly.
Yes.
So I was looking for something which didn't have too large a screen, so that it would have, the kind of better battery life, and something that would fit in my pocket that I could also plug something into. And so that's, kind of concern for someone like me.
Well, there's two interesting things here. The battery, the size of the phone is 5.7 inches, but it's worth pointing out that it's so much of that front panel is screen. It's got a tiny indent at the bottom, and then the front-facing camera actually cuts into the display, like the iPhone 10 or X or whatever you want to describe it. So there's an awful lot of screen real estate on the front of it, but battery life has been pretty good. Android 9 includes dynamic battery management, and that has genuinely moved things on. Unless you are the sort of person that is, affixed to Snapchat and WhatsApp and all the rest of it for 22 hours a day, I can't see you flattening it in conventional usage terms. And that's using, and the other thing is, one nod to the future, because I don't have anything that's capable of pairing at this point. It has aptX and aptX HD Bluetooth, which I've been able to test. They work brilliantly. It also has Bluetooth 5. Now, I don't have any Bluetooth 5 devices yet, but that significantly improves the power management for both the phone and the device connected to it there as well. So all the signs point to the fact that for battery use and battery life, it should be pretty good. If we accept the fact that this desire to have slimline chassis with ultra bright screens and every other toy known to man on them, none of these things are going to worry a good old Nokia 3310. I think this is competitive within the realms of its immediate competition. It's a really lovely thing.
Ed, for me, when it comes to mobile phones, we're all different. We all use them for different things. What's the camera like? Because for me, the camera is the most important thing when it comes to a mobile device. Because I need to have a camera in my pocket at all times.
I have stuck a test image into the review, which you can view at its original size. In standard light conditions, all the way down to heavy overcast and evening, this is a very, very good camera indeed. It also has a bolt-on for a panoramic camera, which is available as an aftermarket extra. Okay. Like any other mobile phone, the moment that you're under artificial light, I haven't found a mobile phone that I rate, and that includes the latest and greatest iterations of the iPhone. I'm saying this as a camera, as a bit of a snob. Obviously I have an SLR, and due to the unique nature of things I take photos of, I have spent time, money and effort getting it to perform without flash in low light. So I'm always judging it against equipment which is dedicated to the task. I regard it as entirely competitive, but I still just look at photos it takes under low light conditions and just don't get that excited about it.
Okay. So I'm going to ask the obvious question here. It's something that we've discussed in the past, and that is, do you actually need really high audio quality when you're on the move, because normally you've got the everyday world going on round about you and so on, and noises and all that kind of thing, whether you're walking through a city centre or you're using it in the car or whatever. So I know it performs well, but do you actually need it?
This is an interesting one. I would argue with streaming services, there's two cheeks of the same arse, for want of a slight. With Tidal and Qobuz and the others, and Deezer as well, although Deezer's a little bit different because it hasn't currently got its lossless bit running via the mobile apps. With Qobuz and Tidal, you can work on the principle. You can have a selection of high-res material that you like downloaded to the phone, and it's good to go at any given time. And if you are sat in a quiet environment, you'll get the benefit. If you're just trying to make noise over a 5-litre V8, you can run the compressed options. I would say that even down to the 320k compressed options, the quality of your Bluetooth implementation and things like that really still does make a significant difference. And I'm not going to lie, I played about with an iPhone 8 the other day, and I'm sorry, the Apple's Bluetooth implementation is painfully behind where it should be.
I agree with that.
Yeah, you get no argument from me from that one.
Don't get me wrong, it's stable and reliable, but sonically, Android, if you are interested in wireless communication, and it's telling that some of the quality and performance that I've had out of both the Essential and then my stock Xperia XA1, which is not an expensive phone. The performance into things like the Cirrus 1HD integrated amp, which is in the review tank, ready to be unleashed later on this month. As I said at the time in that review, it's not a convenience thing anymore. That's a genuine hi-fi source. And the fact that it still does all the convenience things for your cars, your noise cancelling headphones. But if you want to, you can sit down, and it's a proper transmission system where essentially, when you say, do you need high res? I agree with you. For wandering out to the shops, no. But the fact that you could sit down with something like the Cirrus and use this phone as a communication point and use Bluetooth to stream up to and including lower sets of high res resolutions. I mean, aptX HD is good till 2448 without compression now. That's a significant thing. That's changing how we use equipment, and it's to our benefit.
Okay, sounds great. And like I said,
I'm interested in the feedback on the review.
Well, I was just going to say the review will be up soon. It won't be this week as the podcast goes out. It'll probably be bank holiday week. But yes, give us feedback. Let us know what you think. Is this an important area for you when you're considering your mobile phones? But do you want a more audio specific for certain models and so on? And is that something that interests you on the back of Ed's review? Let us know, because it's certainly something that we could consider adding in there as a review every month or every other month, and just have a look at what audio is actually like from mobile devices, and can they actually be high-end sources for your system. It's an interesting one.
So in short, we're going to force you to do mobile phones, Ed.
Do you know what? I enjoyed it much more than I thought I would. Actually pulling through, some of the stuff beyond audio and seeing how it did stuff was we were discussing before we went live that the single thing that you want to avoid from a reviewing perspective is doing the same class of product over and over again. I mean, Phil was saying there's a bit of television burnout, and you just want to keep it spread out across different things. And I thought it was an interesting change.
The term mobile phone has kind of become almost synonymous with this throwaway device. But if you just think of it as a universal control device, I mean, we'll just go back to the Sonos soundbar and that kind of thing. You've got your app. You think of the amount of connected devices you review on the audiophile side that you control via your phone. If you think of it more as just a conduit device, it becomes far more acceptable.
It's interesting.
It's your tricorder. If I want to get geeky.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's interesting what you said about camera, because if I'm going to go and do a job, a professional job or whatever, I take the professional gear. Every other day of the week, my mobile phone camera is of such a quality that I can leave the SLR at home. So if I'm going to a car club or whatever or all this, I take my photos on the camera phone, because the camera is absolutely brilliant for doing that, and it's so quick and easy. Whereas yes, I could get nicer shallow depth of field and stuff with an SLR, but actually it doesn't really need it. So from a convenience point of view, and the fact that you can plug it into the car and you get Apple or CarPlay and all the rest of it, the mobile phone, I can't remember the last time I took a call on one.
Yeah,
I
have to say it's a mobile computing device.
It's interesting. I still make and receive calls a fair bit. I mean, I've given up trying to call either of you sods, because I just envisage that it rings and you just stare at it with a sort of glazed look, and then just go back to whatever you were doing. And partly because it's me calling, but partly because it would appear you simply don't make or receive calls. I am afraid I'm a cynic here. If I want answers out of people, I don't wait for them to call me. I'd like to catch people and be an arse.
But you're chasing money, Ed. It's a different thing, isn't it?
There is that, but it's more if I need answers to something, I genuinely.
I agree with you. You pick up the phone, and you speak to people, absolutely,
and also get them off balance. You generally get better answers.
You get better answers, yeah, absolutely. And like I say, I mean, I can't remember the last time I made a call. It was more, I was making a point though.
No, you're right. I mean, if you think back to the usage patterns 1999 2000, calls, texts, and Snake, and things have things have changed significantly since then. I mean, the amount of time. I mean, my car, I think like yours, Phil, and I believe like yours, Steve, has got built-in sat nav, but I don't. It makes some bizarre decisions. The number of times I actually just default to the Google sat nav in the phone or iPad, it's because it seems to actually have an understanding of how the planet is laid out rather than looking at straight lines.
Ford Sync is terrible. The Sync 3 is absolutely terrible. I use Maps, or actually on the Sync 3 now you can use Waze, and you can use it on your screen in the phone. The latest update allows you to do that, so I just do that. I use Waze, or I use Apple Maps for navigation.
Is it like sat nav done by the Flat Earth Society or something?
The Ford one, it's as you know, computers are difference engines, so it just looks at it and goes, well, that way is 860 feet shorter than what is actually the optimal route, ignoring that 860 feet includes going through a ford, not the actual car, the river, or up a 1-in-2 gradient or something like that, where there is no time saved. It just doesn't seem to be able to recognize where even when you ask it to do fastest, not shortest route, it still defaults to trying to take you down roads with grass in the middle of them, because it believes that there's a saving to be made, because the road is listed as a national speed limit road. But unless you are Juha Kankkunen, you're never going to do 70 miles an hour on it. So Ford, if anyone is listening for Ford Sat Nav, go and pay Google whatever it costs and use that system, and just acknowledge that can't do it.
Yeah, like I say, I mean, AVForums, it's all about getting companies to improve their products. That's why we do what we do. So get on it, Ford.
Publicly shaming them.
Yeah.
Although that said, at the very least, unlike the German ones, at least it doesn't shout at you.
All right, so we could even add sat navs in. Leave your comments in the section below if you think we should go and drive places and just review sat navs. That's it for hardware. We've done enough this week. We'll do movie reviews next. Okay, so movie reviews, first one for a while actually, that myself and Steve have managed to get out to the cinema. We would have done this last week if the film had been released midweek, which seems to be the main thing these days. Most films seem to go midweek, but nope, this went on a Friday, so it's a week late. Our review's been on the homepage a whole week, but it's a film which has got people talking, because at the time of recording the podcast on the Friday, there's 101 comments on the review, and it's had well over thousands of views. So how do you explain this one, The Meg? Jason Statham shark punching, although he doesn't
actually punch a shark.
He doesn't actually punch a shark. They jump the shark a few times.
Well, the shark jumps them. What's
the point? Shark jumps them. Yes, this is definitely what it says on the tin. This is Jason Statham. This is bad acting. This is Chinese funded. It's a big CGI shark. It takes place in a near future because some of the technology is baffling.
Yeah, it is.
The plot holes are massive, gigantic, bigger than the shark. The plot holes. Some of the acting is atrocious. Some of the characters are absolutely terrible, and I came out with a big smile on my face because it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. It was rubbish. There's no plot there. It didn't make any sense. The science didn't make any sense whatsoever. But they didn't play it up. They didn't play it to be serious. I've read some comments that said maybe they should, because it might have been a better film if they had played it a bit more serious. But for me,
that'd be a worse film if they did that.
Maybe.
It would be like Skyscraper, which played it straight, and therefore I didn't enjoy as much.
Yeah. So for me, and again, I think it depends on what kind of mood you go in and what expectations you're setting on this. I watched the trailers. I knew this was going to be a big crock of shit, but it was going to be enjoyable fun, and that's what I got from it. There was some laugh out loud moments. There obviously cliches in there that are played out, but they're played out in a very knowing
jokes.
The Jaws stuff is absolutely brilliant. There's 5, 6, maybe even more references to Jaws in it. It's really, really quite amusing. So I went in expecting fun, not expecting great acting, not expecting much, because it's obviously heavily Chinese financed, this film. It takes place in that area. Lots of characters in there. Chinese language is used quite a bit in there. There's lots of subtitles now and again, but I didn't care. They funded this big fun movie, and that's what you get. It's a big fun movie. It's not taking anything too seriously. It doesn't take up too much of your time either. It gets a little bit slow in the middle, where they could have kept it going a little bit. And the characters are one-dimensional. And the Staith, actually, could have been better. He was all right, but I was expecting him to play it a bit more tongue-in-cheek, a bit more over the top, and he was actually a bit more laid back than I thought he was going to be. But yeah, one-dimensional characters, a two-dimensional shark, and I came out the cinema thinking, that's exactly what I thought it was going to be like, and it was fairly entertaining. You, Steve?
Yeah, no, I didn't go into it expecting it to be Lawrence of Arabia. I expected it to be exactly what it was. It was probably the most fun I've had at the cinema in a long time. I absolutely loved it. It's utterly ridiculous, but it knows that. And as long as the film knows that and doesn't take itself seriously, you can forgive an awful lot, and you have to forgive an awful lot in this. But I didn't think the acting was necessarily bad. There's only so much you can do with some of the dialogue these actors were given to play with. And I thought the chemistry between Staith and the Chinese chick was actually pretty good. And the little girl was really cute and fun. And I thought it absolutely delivered in terms of action, comedy, ludicrousness, and it stayed relatively true to its sort of concept. Yes, there are plot holes. I mean, would you fund something for billions of dollars and not seem to know what they were doing with your money? That seemed a bit strange. I couldn't really work out what possible
You've not worked for the MOD, have you?
Well, yeah. What possible economic gain could be made from their discovery? I thought, why? What were they going to do with this? And the one big thing that annoyed me was there's a bit towards the beginning with a submersible, which is going down to a very great depth, down to the Mariana Trench, which is 10,000 meters, something like that. And initially I thought, it's got windows. That's ridiculous. It will just crush. Then I realised actually they weren't windows. They were actually screens within inside the sub, so it was an enclosed sub, and there were screens showing them the view outside. I thought, oh, that's quite clever. And then about 10 minutes later, someone goes down to that depth in what is clearly a mini sub that would have been crushed to a tiny dot at that depth. So there's loads of, if you're a diver, or if you've ever dived at any kind of depth, if you know anything about diving, you'll know how accurate the abyss is.
Yeah, but
how inaccurate this is. But then again, like you say, Phil, you've got to just suspend disbelief, because it does involve a shark that's been extinct for 2 million years. But yeah, I love the Jaws references. I thought it was really good fun. There were moments when I laughed out loud, and I was laughing out loud at how utterly ridiculous it was. But it was ridiculous in a way that was making me happy. And that was the point. I mean, the Staith, he just dives into the water straight after a bloody great shark. Doesn't give a monkeys. The effects are pretty good. I thought the effects were pretty good. It's a little bit murky in places. I wouldn't like to see it in 3D. I think a lot of it would be unwatchable. But yeah, it delivered everything I wanted it to do. For me, it's a solid 8 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed it. As long as you go in expecting, silliness, then you're going to be fine.
It delivers.
Yeah, absolutely delivers. Yeah, I couldn't argue. And I've read some of the comments
too. I'd like to see. I'd probably get a disc because I think it'll look and sound pretty cool.
Yeah, the soundtrack was.
The water stuff
phenomenal.
always sounds great.
Yeah. I saw it in a D-Box theatre yesterday,
Oh, yeah?
and it was pretty phenomenal. I didn't pay the extra for the D-Box chair, but it's one of the bigger screens in the venue, which is why I chose that one. And it didn't disappoint whatsoever. It was loud, obnoxious, the way you expect it to be. As well as the film. So yeah, I think I would score it a very solid 7.5 out of 10, maybe even an 8.
Well, there you go. Sharktastic. I haven't seen it. You'd be astonished. Look, I haven't been to cinema. I mean, who saw that coming?
Yeah, and actually, this is coining it in. I've just read the other day, Steve, that it's made a shed load of money. Absolute shed load of money.
It'll do well in China, I suspect, which is always good news. Yeah, it's good. It'll make money. It's going to do well.
As long as it keeps Jason Statham in the limelight.
Right.
The thing is also, I suspect it's always hard to tell with male actors, but I just sense that he should be able to work graciously into hamming it up as an increasingly old bloke.
I'll tell you what, I thought Jason Statham was younger than me, and I looked up his on IMDb. He's younger than me by a month, and I thought, my God, he's ripped. There's a scene where he's got his shirt off, and you're thinking, bloody hell! How do you maintain that kind of physique at 51? Is quite impressive.
Yeah, well, it's
the guy. I know he was a professional. He dived at the Commonwealth Games, didn't he, for England? And he was, and obviously that early work is continued through into our later life. But yeah, his physique is absolutely amazing. And for at that age, I was just gobsmacked he could deliver that kind of shape at his age. But I like Statham. Look, he's got next year. He's got the Rock team up in the Fast and Furious spin-off. I saw an interesting theory about that, which is by Mark Bernardin, who does a Fat Man on Batman with Kevin Smith. But he was saying he thinks because of the last Fast and Furious movie, there's massive falling out between Vin Diesel and The Rock. The Rock's has what's called a work ethic. He didn't like the way that Vin Diesel was just fanning around, not doing anything, and they had a massive falling out. And they are not even in the same scene together at any point in that film. Anytime where you think they're in the same scene together, they're using body doubles. They wouldn't even be on the same set at the same time. So now The Rock's doing a spin-off film with Jason Statham, and the theory that Mark Bernard had was they're going to gradually move everyone across to the spin-off films and just leave Vin Diesel his own and then stop making Fast and Furious movies to get rid of him.
Maybe they could turn Paul Walker into a Force ghost.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Yeah.
It would be like Randall and Hopkirk deceased. But
I'm really looking forward to Jason Statham and The Rock in their own movie next year. That's going to be great.
Okay, so that's a Meg. Thumbs up from me and Steve, and it should make a fantastic disc as well. So films opening this week, Steve. Anything? I've seen a trailer for the first one.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's rubbish.
Yeah,
there's not much coming out. We're entering a sort of a bleak few weeks as a cinema releases until The Predator comes out. I think on the 12th of September. So this week we've got The Spy Who Dumped Me. A comedy with Mila Kunis, where she basically is going out with a spy. He dumps her. She doesn't know he's a spy. He dumps her, and then she discovers he's a spy and gets involved with all the shenanigans. I think Kate McKinnon's in it as well, who was in Ghostbusters. Looks very
shenanigans. Marks for the use of the word shenanigans there.
It looks fairly generic in the trailers. And
I was going to say Mila Kunis seems to have somehow segued into Jennifer Aniston's career of that kind of middle of the road comedy hell.
And yeah, I saw the top 10 actresses who earned the most money last year, and somehow Jennifer Aniston was 5th. What was she in last year? What did she do? Is that from? That must be from other contracts, like advertising contracts, and it can't be from films. Because I haven't seen her in anything for a long time, not anything good. Anyway, Spy Dump Me. I think you know what you're going to get from the title. Also Slender Man, which is a horror film based on this whole Slender Man internet thing, which looks pretty rubbish. And a new film from Spike Lee, BlacKkKlansman, which is a true story about a black cop who infiltrated the Klan, if you can believe that. So that does actually look quite interesting.
I just want to know how he did it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, really? So BlacKkKlansman, that's out this week as well.
Okay, so let's move over to discs, Steve. So 4K and Blu-ray, what have we got coming up?
In terms of disc releases, we've got Rampage, The Rock's back with a giant ape and a couple of giant monsters, which I quite enjoyed at the cinema. I don't think I'd pick it up. I don't think I enjoyed it enough to pick it up on disc, but it was dumb.
You what? It's got The Rock in it.
I don't know everything The Rock's been in.
There was a time, Steve, where you bought some real shit on 4K, yet you're not going to pick this up.
Well, there's a lot coming out on 4K disc at the moment, and I need to be picky. Otherwise, that would just too much money.
Somebody the other day said we need to do a FaceTime when I'm in Fry's because you're not going to see us this year. So somebody was saying we need to do a FaceTime so you can get Steve's order. Keep up this edition.
I think that's how we know that the format's hit kind of critical mass, is that Steve stopped buying everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There's too much releases. Anyway, Rampage just out on Blu-ray and 4K disc. Out on Blu-ray and 4K disc from a brand new restoration is The Deer Hunter, which I am getting. Michael Cimino's Oscar winner from 1978, I think it was.
Everybody here seen that?
I have.
Yeah.
Even I've seen that.
Of course.
Mark, yeah.
I don't think it's a very realistic portrayal of the Vietnam War, but it's a fun. It's not. I don't think it's a fun movie, but it's certainly a well-made film, albeit a bit silly towards the end. But yes, it's about a group of steel workers who end up going to the Vietnam War, and then the effects afterwards as well. With Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken and is it John Savage? I think it is. It's and Meryl Streep. So it's got an amazing cast, and yes, it won the Academy Award for Best Film and Best Director from Michael Cimino. I think it was 78. I think it was the first big, it was probably the first big movie to address the Vietnam War after the war had ended. Because the following year, 79, was Apocalypse Now. I know it was made before, but it took so long in post-production, didn't come out until afterwards. But anyway, that's been fully restored. So I'm looking forward to that on 4K disc. And also, we got Black Book, which is getting a second Blu-ray release, and that's Paul Verhoeven's not last film, because he did one since then called Elle, but it was a film he made a few years ago set in Nazi-occupied Holland. It's sort of an espionage thriller, which I thought was very good. That's coming out. And also Police Story 1 and 2, which have had a restoration for Blu-ray release, and that was actually a competition prize up until the day of this podcast going up. But I think Mark said last week he might pick that up, or at least enter the competition.
Yes.
And Kazi's reviews are on the homepage.
Yes. And
Can't
that's
say
it.
better than that.
Disc-wise this week.
Okay, good stuff. Right, so just wrapping up, there's a few bits and pieces that we need to go over. Star Trek Discovery, they have cast it's Spock. I didn't know Spock was going to be it. Is this a spoiler, Steve?
No, I don't think it's a spoiler because, well, the trailers, obviously they interact with the Enterprise, and we know at this point in the timeline Spock was a crew member, so you kind of had to expect it. And plus also, we've seen his dad and his mum, and his foster sister is the lead, so I'd be gobsmacked if Spock didn't show up at some point. So they've cast Ethan Peck, who I must admit is an actor I'm not familiar with, but obviously Zachary Quinto played him in the recent films, and of course Leonard Nimoy played him previous to that. Yes, we're gonna have Spock. Well, we're gonna have the Enterprise and Spock and Captain Pike, among other things, in the new season of Star Trek Discovery.
Do you know what this smacks of, Steve? This smacks of the fact that desperation, because Discovery did so well without any of these hardbacks. It was a really good non-Star Trek series, and that's the problem.
They got a lot of criticism from Star Trek fans that it wasn't Star Trek-y enough.
Yeah,
so that's why I liked it.
Yeah.
So now they're going full Star Trek. I think they're bringing in the Enterprise, they're bringing in Captain Pike, they're bringing in Spock. It'll be interesting to see how, and they've also changed showrunners and stuff. There's been a lot of behind the scenes shenanigans going. Again, I've used that word twice. Going on behind the scenes on Discovery. Now they've announced the new show they're doing with Picard. Presumably, that will involve. I hope that will involve other members of the new Next Generation crew, because they're all still alive. So yes, I don't know. I just feel a bit like Lucasfilm. Those people running Star Trek don't really know what they're doing anymore. I just seem to be chucking things at the wall and seeing what sticks.
You see, I mean, I would have loved them to have done something post DS9, where if you like, going a bit post, Deer Hunter, post Vietnam, a crew of people who have had to, reacclimatizing from having to do terrible actual war things, and the pull back down from that. I honestly think that could have been done
that would be interesting.
Exceptionally well.
Yeah.
They chose not to.
Well, you see, the whole thing for Discovery for me was, one of the story angles was showing how desperate war makes each side, and I found that really interesting because the Federation has always been this, goody two shoes, lovely organisation, and we were getting to see a darker side of that. And I thought there was plenty of scope for them to take that even further. And it just seems to be this criticism that came from certain factors and factions of the fandom has kind of forced their hand a little bit, which is a shame because I think it's just going to turn into generic Star Trek again.
Well, it's dangerous
the Orville's
to
doing
the Orville.
Yeah, absolutely. It does say something though when you prefer the Orville to
the Orville's great.
I know.
It's really good. Yes, I mean I think that's probably what slightly stung them was that the Discovery came out and was, I think, generally well received by non-Star Trek fans and criticised by hardcore Star Trek fans, and at the same time out comes the Orville, which is basically Star Trek and was doing it better. If you're talking about Star Trek in the traditional sense of the word, it was doing it better than Discovery, even though I thoroughly enjoyed Discovery and the Orville for separate reasons. I think they got stung by that a little bit, and now they're trying to sort of reclaim the Star Trek territory that the Orville's basically taken off them. And I think I'd have preferred, like you say, Phil, if they just continued with the different approach they were taking with Discovery, because we've got, there've been 5 or 6 other Star Trek shows doing Star Trek stuff. Do we need more of that? I'm quite happy to watch something that takes a different approach to it. But anyway, I guess we'll find out when in the new year what happens with Discovery.
Yeah, I just like with the analogy of kind of Lucas. I just think that it feels like they can't get away from the big kind of like monoliths of the Star Trek universe, and they always kind of get dragged back to them. I think it was time to try something genuinely new. At this point, haven't we seen just about everything we're going to see regarding Spock, or is it just now a case of you have a core group of characters and we just want to see them in a variety of new scenarios, and so people just want traditional Star Trek
goes
back.
to laundry. Spock goes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the funny thing is that all of these big franchises are all almost in the shadow right now of the Marvel universe, which is it's kind of this juxtaposition when you see this kind of huge organization doing it well and kind of joining everything together and clearly having some kind of a plan where you think that there's going to be something interesting, over the next 2 years, over the next 5 years. They've got a plan of where it's going. It seems like everyone else is just kind of scrabbling to try and keep up. DC, whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek, everyone else is trying to find a way to kind of build some kind of momentum and kind of almost fall into the slipstream of that kind of sci-fi fandom.
I was reading this week as well that the new Star Trek movies are probably finished because they can't get the cast on board because the demands for wages and all the rest of it seem to be more than what the producers are prepared to pay. So it looks like
they wanted to do the next Star Trek film was going to involve Kirk and Kirk's dad, who in the original film in the first Star Trek movie was played by Chris Hemsworth. So obviously has become a much bigger star since that film was made. But I thought, interesting, Kirk and his dad and 2 big name actors playing the roles. But yeah, they didn't make a lot of money on Star Trek Beyond, or even may have lost money. And
I was going to say, it looks like diminishing returns at this point. Some point they were going to give in, do something big, spend big on all the actors, and it was going to tank, I think, at some point.
Yeah, and I think the costs involved with getting, particularly Chris Hemsworth, you can command pretty big numbers these days. Getting him on board, I don't think the rewards were there at that budget level. So
it's a shame, but
it is, because I thought Star Trek Beyond was really good. I really enjoyed Star Trek Beyond. I thought it was actually Simon Pegg understood what made Star Trek fun, and actually, unlike the first 2 Abrams movies, which I felt were more like Star Wars films than Star Trek films, Star Trek Beyond felt like a Star Trek movie, and it was very enjoyable, very entertaining, had well-written characters, and a villain who you could at least empathise with to a degree. So I enjoyed it a lot, and it's a real shame that they aren't doing it anymore, because I thought they were getting on the right track at that point. But I guess they obviously spend a lot of money on these TV shows too, so I guess there's a finite amount of cash available. But I think Mark's right. I think any studio with any kind of franchise is desperately trying to milk it because they're seeing how much money Marvel's making. And unfortunately, you can't necessarily replicate that. Even DC can't replicate what Marvel are doing. And DC have a back catalogue of hundreds of characters and decades of comic book storylines to mine into, but they seem to be unable to do it. I think, what's happening at Marvel isn't just the fact that they've got a franchise to build on, that they've got characters to use, or they've got decades of storylines. It's about, I think there's Kevin Feige, and I think it's definitely him, has managed it and planned it exceptionally well in terms of having the courage to do what they did, which I think took a lot of balls at the time. There was no guarantee that Avengers was going to work, because they were using their B-list characters. I mean, they couldn't use Spider-Man, they couldn't use the X-Men, they couldn't use the Fantastic Four, which are the big Marvel titles. They took a big risk and it paid off, but they've managed that franchise extremely well. And a lot of the other, unfortunately, even DC, who have a similar back catalogue to deal with, haven't managed it as well, and clearly don't have a clue what they're doing half the time. So yeah, it's not as easy to replicate as it might seem, even if you have the characters to play with in the first place.
Yep. Okay, well, that's it. We've done a lot more damage again this week, but that's all the time we have for the podcast. So my thanks to Steve Withers.
Any man who drinks Dom Perignon 52 can't be all bad.
Ed Selley.
What a helpful chat.
And Mark Botwright.
You shot your bolt, Stromberg.
Don't forget, there is no podcast next week, so don't go looking for the podcast, but we will be following up on the 3rd of September with our IFA special. It will be available to download from Monday evening. So that's the 3rd of September, Monday evening, for our IFA special podcast. But that's it. Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course, give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time with all the news from IFA.